The space station floated in the darkness between three different star systems. It was massive, almost like a small moon made of metal and glass. Thousands of windows glowed with soft light, and ships came and went at all hours. This was the Galactic Unity Academy, a school where young people from dozens of different planets came to study together. T pressed his face against the window of the transport ship as it approached. He was 19 years old, with messy black hair and tired eyes. He had traveled for 3 weeks to get here, and his body still felt strange from all the different gravity levels he had experienced. Earth was far behind him now, just a tiny blue dot lost among millions of stars. The ship docked with a soft bump. T grabbed his small bag and followed the other passengers through the airlock. The moment he stepped onto the station, he felt eyes on him. Aliens of all shapes and sizes walked past him, and many of them stared. Some whispered to each other. T knew why. Humans were new to the galaxy. His species had only made contact with alien life 50 years ago, and they were still considered primitive by galactic standards. Earth had no special technology to offer. Humans could not breathe underwater like the Mori people. They could not survive extreme heat like the Dravoks. They were just ordinary. A small robot floated toward him and spoke in a mechanical voice. "Human Student T, welcome to Unity Academy. Your room is in Section 7. Please follow the blue lights on the floor." T nodded and walked. The hallways were wide and clean, filled with students from every corner of the galaxy. He saw creatures with 4 arms, beings made of what looked like living crystal, and tall figures with skin like polished metal. Everyone seemed to know where they were going. Everyone except him. He followed the blue lights until he reached his room. It was small but comfortable, with a bed, a desk, and a window that showed the endless stars outside. T sat on the bed and let out a long breath. He was really here. He was really doing this. The next morning, T went to the main cafeteria for breakfast. The room was enormous, with hundreds of tables and food stations that served dishes from countless worlds. He grabbed something that looked safe, a bowl of warm grain with some kind of fruit, and looked for a place to sit. That was when he first saw her. She sat alone at a table in the corner, far from everyone else. Her skin was silver blue, smooth and soft like moonlight on water. Her hair was white and fell past her shoulders. She was thin, almost too thin, and she held a small container in her hands like it was the most precious thing in the universe. T watched as she carefully opened the container and took a tiny sip of the liquid inside. Water, he realized. Just water. But she drank it like someone who was afraid it might be her last drop. He wanted to go talk to her, but something held him back. He did not know the rules here yet. He did not know who was safe to approach and who was not. So he sat at a different table and ate his breakfast alone. Over the next few days, T learned more about the academy and its students. He learned that the tall, muscular aliens with dark red skin were called Dravoks. They came from a hot planet with active volcanoes, and they were known as warriors. The Dravoks held a lot of power in the galactic government, and they made sure everyone knew it. He also learned about the silver-blue girl. Her name was Lyra, and she was a Velari. The Velari were a peaceful species from a water-rich world. Their bodies needed special mineral water to survive. Without it, they would grow weak and eventually die. It was not like humans, who could survive for days without water. For a Velari, even a few hours without hydration could be dangerous. But that was not the worst part. T learned that the Velari homeworld had been destroyed in a war 10 years ago. A larger empire had invaded their planet and taken everything. The Velari who survived became refugees, scattered across the galaxy with nothing. They had no power, no money, and no home. Most species looked down on them. T noticed that Lyra was always alone. No one sat with her. No one talked to her. Other students walked past her like she was invisible, or worse, like she was something unpleasant they wanted to avoid. One afternoon, T was walking through the corridor near the training rooms when he heard laughter. It was not happy laughter. It was the cruel kind, the kind that made his stomach twist. He turned the corner and saw them. 3 Dravoks stood in a circle around Lyra. The leader was a female named Kira. She was tall and strong, with sharp teeth and eyes that burned like hot coals. Beside her stood Vorn, a male who was even bigger, with arms like tree trunks. Lyra stood in the middle, her head down, her body trembling. "Look at the little water beggar," Kira said loudly. "So weak, so pathetic, your whole species is a joke." Vorn laughed. "I heard they cry when they get thirsty. Is that true? Are you going to cry for us?" Lyra said nothing. She just held her water container tighter against her chest. Kira stepped closer. "You know what I think? I think you do not belong here. This academy is for strong species, for species with a future. What future do the Velari have? None." T stood frozen at the corner. His heart was beating fast. He wanted to do something, but what could he do? He was just a human. He had no power here. If he tried to help, the Dravoks would probably hurt him too. So he did nothing. He just watched as Kira laughed one more time and walked away with her friends. Lyra stayed where she was for a long moment, her shoulders shaking. Then she wiped her eyes and walked in the opposite direction. T felt sick. He felt like a coward. That night he could not sleep. He lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, thinking about Lyra and the way she had looked so small and so afraid. He thought about Earth, about all the times humans had been cruel to each other. He had hoped that things would be different out here in space, among the stars, but cruelty, it seemed, was everywhere. He made a decision. He did not know what he could do. He did not know if he could make any difference at all, but he could not keep watching and doing nothing. That was not who he wanted to be. The next morning, T went to the cafeteria early. He saw Lyra sitting in her usual corner, alone as always. He took a deep breath, picked up his tray, and walked toward her table. She looked up as he approached, her silver eyes wide with surprise and fear. "Is this seat taken?" T asked. Lyra stared at him for a long moment. No one had ever asked to sit with her before. She shook her head slowly. T sat down. "I am T," he said. "I am from Earth." "I know," Lyra whispered. "I have seen you watching." T felt his face grow warm. "I am sorry. I did not mean to be strange. I just—" He paused, searching for the right words. "I noticed that you are always alone. I thought maybe you could use a friend." Lyra looked down at her water container. Why would a human want to be friends with a Velari? We have nothing to offer. We are nothing. "That is not true," T said firmly. "Where I come from, being someone's friend is not about what they can offer. It is about caring for each other. It is about not being alone." Lyra looked at him again, and this time there was something different in her eyes. It was small and fragile, like a tiny flame that could be blown out by the smallest wind. But it was there. "Hope." "Thank you," she said softly. T smiled. It was a small start, but it was a start. He did not know what the future would bring. He did not know if he could protect Lyra from the Dravoks or from the cruelty of the galaxy. But he knew one thing for certain. He would try. Days passed at the academy, and T began to understand how things really worked. On the surface, the Galactic Unity Academy was supposed to be a place of equality. All species were welcome. All students had the same rights. That was what the official rules said. But reality was different. The Dravoks controlled almost everything. They held the best rooms, the best seats in class, and the best positions in student leadership. When a Dravok walked down the hallway, other students moved out of the way. When a Dravok spoke, others listened. And when a Dravok hurt someone weaker, the teachers looked the other way. T saw it happen again and again. He watched as Kira and her friends pushed smaller aliens against walls. He watched as they took food from other students and laughed when anyone complained. He watched as the academy staff did nothing, said nothing, because the Dravoks had powerful families and important connections. But no one suffered more than Lyra. Every day, it seemed like the Dravox found new ways to make her life miserable. They tripped her in the hallways. They knocked her books out of her hands. They called her names that made other students laugh and point. T tried to spend more time with her. He sat with her at meals and walked with her between classes. Lyra was quiet and shy, but slowly she began to open up. She told him about her homeworld, about the beautiful blue oceans and the crystal cities that floated on the water. She told him about her family, most of whom had died in the war. "I was very young when it happened," she said one evening as they sat in the academy garden. "I do not remember much, just fire and screaming and my mother carrying me to a ship." "I am sorry," T said. He did not know what else to say. Lyra shook her head. "It was long ago. I have learned to live with the pain, but some days—" She paused and looked down at her hands. "Some days it feels like the universe wants me to disappear, like I am not supposed to be here." "That is not true," T said firmly. "You have as much right to be here as anyone else." Lyra smiled, but it was a sad smile. "You are kind, T, but kindness does not change facts. The Velari are dying out. In another 100 years we might be gone completely, and nobody will care." T wanted to argue, but he did not have the words. He just sat with her in silence, watching the artificial stars twinkle on the garden dome above them. The next day, things got worse. T was in class when it happened. The teacher was explaining something about galactic history when the door opened and another student came in with a message. T's communicator buzzed a moment later. It was from Yuna, a human girl he had met in his first week. "Come to the East Corridor. Now it is Lyra." T raised his hand and asked to be excused. The teacher barely looked at him as she nodded. He ran out of the room and through the hallways until he reached the East Corridor. A small crowd had gathered. Students stood in a circle, watching something in the middle. T pushed his way through until he could see. Lyra was on the floor. Her water container lay broken beside her, the precious liquid spreading across the metal floor in a thin puddle. Kira stood over her, laughing, while Vorn and another Dravok watched with cruel smiles. "Look at her," Kira said to the crowd. "The little water beggar cannot even hold onto her bottle. How pathetic." Lyra tried to reach for the spilled water, her hands shaking. Her silver skin had already started to turn pale, a sign that she was becoming dehydrated. For a human, losing some water was not a big problem. For a Velari, it could be deadly. "Please," Lyra whispered. "Please, I need that water." Kira stepped on Lyra's hand, pressing it against the floor. Lyra cried out in pain. "You need it. Then beg for it. Get on your knees and beg." The crowd was silent. Nobody moved. Nobody helped. They all just watched like this was some kind of entertainment. T felt his blood turn hot. He wanted to rush forward and push Kira away. He wanted to scream at all these people for just standing there. But before he could move, he felt a hand on his arm. It was Yuna. "Do not," she whispered. "The Dravox will destroy you. There is nothing you can do." T looked back at the scene. Lyra had tears running down her face. Her whole body was trembling. Slowly, painfully, she lowered her head to the floor. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "Please give me water. I am begging you, please." Kira smiled. It was the most terrible smile T had ever seen. She lifted her foot and crushed the already broken container into smaller pieces. "No," she said simply. "You are not worth the water it would take to keep you alive." Then she turned and walked away, her friends following behind her. The crowd began to scatter, conversations returning to normal like nothing had happened. Within a minute, the corridor was almost empty. T broke free from Yuna's grip and ran to Lyra. She was still on the floor, staring at the spilled water that was slowly draining into the floor grates. Her skin was getting paler by the second. "Lyra," T said, kneeling beside her. "Lyra, are you okay?" It was a stupid question. Of course she was not okay. "My water," Lyra whispered. "That was all I had for today. I cannot. I cannot get more until tomorrow. T felt panic rise in his chest. What happens if you do not drink until tomorrow? Lyra closed her eyes. I will become very weak. My body will start to shut down. If I am lucky, I will just pass out. If I am not lucky. She did not finish the sentence. Yuna came over and helped T lift Lyra to her feet. They took her to her room and laid her on the bed. Hajun, another human student who had heard what happened, brought a wet cloth for her forehead, but they all knew it was not enough. We have to find her more water, T said. The Velari water is special, Hajun explained. It has minerals that their bodies need. Regular water will help a little but not much, and the Academy only gives out Velari water at certain times. Then we go to the medical center, T said. They must have some. Yuna shook her head. I already checked. The medical center said they cannot give out special supplies without approval, and guess who controls the approval process? Friends of the Dravok families. T wanted to punch something. The whole system was designed to hurt people like Lyra. Every door was closed. Every path was blocked. He looked at Lyra lying on the bed, her breathing shallow, her silver skin fading to gray. She looked so small, so fragile, like she might disappear at any moment. There has to be something we can do, he said. There is nothing, Yuna said quietly. This is how things are, T. The strong crush the weak. That is the rule of the galaxy. But T refused to accept that. He sat beside Lyra's bed through the night, giving her small sips of regular water whenever she could manage it. It was not enough, but it was something. She drifted in and out of sleep, sometimes whimpering, sometimes calling out names he did not recognize. As the station's lights dimmed to simulate nighttime, T made himself a promise. He did not care about the rules. He did not care about the Dravoks or their power. He was going to find a way to help Lyra. He was going to find a way to stop this cruelty. He did not know how yet, but he would figure it out. Because this was wrong. Everything about this was wrong. And somewhere deep inside him, T believed that one person could make a difference. Maybe not a big difference. Maybe just a small one. But even a small light could shine in the darkness. He stayed awake until morning, watching over Lyra, thinking about what he could do. By the time the lights brightened again, he had a plan. It was simple and maybe even foolish, but it was something. Tomorrow, everything would change. T spent the early morning hours doing research. He sat at his desk with his tablet, reading everything he could find about Velari biology. Most of the information was sad. The Velari were considered a dying species, their population falling every year. Few scientists bothered to study them anymore. Few doctors cared enough to help. But T found what he was looking for. Deep in an old medical document, he discovered that while Velari needed their special mineral water for long-term health, regular purified water could keep them alive in emergencies. It was not perfect. It would not give them the minerals they needed, but it would stop them from dying. He checked the time. It was still early. Lyra would be waking up soon, and she would need water immediately. Her body had gone almost the entire night without proper hydration. T filled his own canteen with purified water from the station's supply. It was the best he could get without special permission. Then he went to Lyra's room. Yuna was already there, looking exhausted. She had taken the second half of the night watch. Lyra was awake but barely moving. Her skin had turned from silver blue to a pale gray color that frightened T. Here, T said, kneeling beside the bed. Drink this. Lyra looked at the canteen with confused eyes. That is your water. I can get more, T said. You cannot drink. Lyra hesitated for only a moment before taking the canteen with shaking hands. She drank slowly, carefully, like every drop was precious. When she finished, some color had returned to her face. She was still weak, but she was better. Thank you, she whispered. T nodded. Can you walk? You need to get to the distribution center when it opens. They will give you your Velari water for the day. Lyra tried to stand but stumbled. T caught her and helped her stay upright. Together with Yuna, they supported Lyra as she walked through the corridors toward the distribution center. Other students stared at them as they passed. Some whispered. A few looked curious. Most looked away. They reached the distribution center just as it opened. Lyra got her daily water supply, a small container of the mineral-rich liquid her body needed. She drank half of it immediately and put the rest in her bag. "I do not know how to thank you," she said to T and Yuna. "You saved my life." "Friends do not need thanks," T said. Lyra looked at him with something close to wonder. "I have never had friends before, not real ones." The morning passed quietly. T went to his classes, but he could not focus on the lessons. He kept thinking about what had happened and what might happen next. Kira had not appeared yet today. That worried him. The Dravoks were not the type to let things go. They would be back. He was right. It happened in the afternoon near the training grounds. T was walking to his next class when he heard voices. Angry voices. He knew immediately what was happening. He ran. When he turned the corner, he saw them. Kira stood in the middle of the corridor with Vorn and two other Dravoks. Lyra was backed against the wall, her water container clutched to her chest. Her eyes were wide with terror. "Did you think yesterday was the end?" Kira said loudly. "Did you think we were finished with you? No, little water beggar, we are just getting started." Kira reached out and grabbed Lyra's water container. Lyra tried to hold on, but she was too weak, still recovering from the night before. Kira pulled it away easily. "No," Lyra begged. "Please, please do not." Kira held the container up and examined it. "This is your whole supply for the day, is it not? Your precious Velari water. Without this, you will die." "Please," Lyra said again. Tears were streaming down her face. "I will do anything, please." Kira smiled that terrible smile. "Anything. Then get on your knees. Beg like the worthless creature you are. Maybe if you beg hard enough, I will give you back one drop." Lyra sank to her knees. Her whole body was shaking. "Please," she sobbed. "Please, I beg you, give me my water. I need it to live, please." A crowd was gathering again. Students of all species stopped to watch. Some looked uncomfortable, but no one moved to help. No one wanted to challenge the Dravoks. T stood at the edge of the crowd, his heart pounding. His hands were balled into fists at his sides. He could feel the fear rising in his chest, telling him to stay quiet, stay invisible, stay safe. But then he looked at Lyra on her knees, begging for her life. He looked at the crowd standing around her, doing nothing. He looked at Kira, enjoying every moment of this cruelty. And something inside him broke. He pushed through the crowd and walked straight toward Kira. People gasped. Someone grabbed at his arm, but he pulled free. He kept walking until he was standing directly in front of the Dravok leader. "Hey," he said. His voice was calm, but inside he was terrified. Kira looked down at him. She was taller than him, stronger than him, and her eyes burned with surprise and amusement. "A human," she said. "What do you want, primitive?" T did not answer her. Instead, he walked past her, ignoring the confused looks from Vorn and the other Dravoks. He knelt beside Lyra and pulled out his canteen. It was full again. He had filled it after giving Lyra water that morning, just in case. "Drink," he said softly. Lyra stared at him with wide eyes. "T, no, they will hurt you." "I know," T said. "Drink anyway." With trembling hands, Lyra took the canteen and drank. The regular water would help her survive, at least for now. Kira's amusement faded. Her face twisted with anger. "What do you think you are doing, human?" T stood up and turned to face her. His heart was beating so fast he thought it might burst out of his chest, but he kept his face calm. He kept his voice steady. "I am giving water to someone who is thirsty," he said. "Is that against the rules here?" The corridor went silent. Even the whispers stopped. Everyone was watching, waiting to see what would happen next. Kira stepped closer. She was so tall that T had to look up to meet her eyes. Her teeth were sharp, designed for tearing meat. Her muscles could break him in half without effort. "You have made a very big mistake," she said quietly. "Do you know who I am? Do you know what my family can do to you?" "I know who you are," T said. "I know you are a bully who likes to hurt people weaker than you. I know you think that makes you strong, but where I come from, that just makes you a coward." The crowd gasped. No one talked to a Dravok like that. No one dared. Kira's hand shot out and grabbed T by the collar. She lifted him off the ground like he weighed nothing. Her eyes burned with fury. "I could kill you right now," she hissed. "I could break every bone in your body. Who would stop me? Who would care about one dead human?" T looked her directly in the eyes. His feet dangled in the air. His collar was choking him, but he did not look away. "Every human on this station would care," he said, his voice strained. "And you know what humans do when one of our own is hurt." Kira paused. Her grip loosened just a little. "We remember," T continued. "We do not forget. We do not forgive. Hurt me now and you will have to watch your back for the rest of your life. Not because we are strong, but because we are stubborn. We hold grudges, and we never stop." He was not threatening violence. He was not promising revenge. He was stating a fact. Humans were known across the galaxy for their strange psychology. They formed bonds that other species could not understand. They protected each other with a fierce loyalty that seemed almost irrational. Kira knew this. Everyone knew this. It was one of the few things that made humans dangerous. For a long moment, no one moved. The corridor was completely silent. Then Kira dropped T. He landed hard on his feet and stumbled but did not fall. Kira stared at him with hatred in her eyes. "This is not over," she said. "Not even close." She turned and walked away. Vorn and the other Dravoks followed, casting dark looks over their shoulders. The crowd began to scatter, conversations returning slowly. Yuna appeared at T's side, her face pale. "Are you insane? Do you have any idea what you just did?" T let out a shaky breath. His legs felt like water, probably something very stupid. He turned to Lyra, who was still on the floor, looking up at him with tears in her eyes. He offered her his hand. "Can you stand?" She took his hand and he helped her to her feet. She was still weak, still trembling, but there was something different in her eyes now, something he had not seen before. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you risk yourself for me? I am nobody. I have nothing to give you." T looked at her and smiled. It was a small smile, tired but genuine. "Where I come from," he said, "giving water to someone who is thirsty is not bravery. It is just being human." Lyra stared at him for a long moment. Then, for the first time since he had met her, she smiled back. It was a real smile, bright and beautiful despite the tears on her face. In that moment something changed, not just between them but in the whole corridor. The students who had watched were now talking among themselves, their voices different than before, quieter, more thoughtful. A human had stood up to the Dravoks. A human had risked everything to help someone who had nothing. The word would spread, the story would grow, and nothing would ever be quite the same again. The news traveled fast. By evening, everyone at the academy was talking about what had happened. A human had challenged Kira. A human had defied the Dravoks. Some said he was brave. Some said he was foolish. Most agreed he would not live long. T sat in his room that night, staring at the ceiling. His hands were still shaking from what he had done. He had never been brave before. He had never stood up to anyone. On Earth, he had been the quiet kid who avoided trouble and kept his head down. But something about seeing Lyra on her knees, begging for water, had changed him. He could not explain it. He just knew that some things were more important than being safe. A knock came at his door. He opened it to find Yuna and Hajan standing outside. "We need to talk," Yuna said. They came inside and sat down. Hajan looked worried. Yuna looked angry. "Do you understand what you have done?" Yuna asked. The Dravoks are not going to forget this. They are going to come for you. I know, T said. They could kill you. They could hurt everyone close to you. They could make your life so miserable that you will wish you were dead. I know, T said again. Yuna threw her hands up in frustration. Then why? Why did you do it? T thought about the question for a long time before answering. Because someone had to, he finally said. Because if we all just stand by and watch, then we are no better than the Bullies. I could not live with myself if I did nothing. Hajan, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. I felt the same way. When I saw what they were doing to Lyra, I wanted to help, but I was scared. Everyone was scared, T said. I was scared too. I am still scared. But being scared is not a good enough reason to let someone suffer. Yuna sighed and leaned back in her chair. You really are strange, T. Most humans would have stayed quiet. Most humans would have protected themselves. Maybe, T admitted. But I do not want to be like most humans. I want to be better. There was a moment of silence. Then Yuna smiled just a little. Fine, she said. If you are going to be stupid, then I might as well be stupid with you. We are in this together now. Hajan nodded. Me too. Whatever happens, we face it as a group. T felt warmth spread through his chest. He had not expected this. He had thought he would have to face the consequences alone, but here were two people willing to stand with him. Thank you, he said. The next few days were tense. Kira and her group did not attack immediately. They were waiting, watching, planning. T could feel their eyes on him whenever he walked through the corridors. Other Dravoks, ones he had never seen before, started appearing in his classes. They sat in the back and stared at him with cold expressions. But something else was happening too. Other students started approaching T. Not many at first, just a few. A small alien with green skin came up to him in the cafeteria and said, I saw what you did. That was brave. A tall being made of crystal nodded at him in the hallway. A group of humans from another section found him and asked if they could help. The word had spread beyond just gossip now. It had become something more. A story, a symbol. Lyra stayed close to T during these days. She was still quiet, still shy, but there was a new strength in her eyes. She no longer walked with her head down. She no longer flinched when someone looked at her. You changed something, she told him one evening as they sat in the garden. I do not know what exactly, but things feel different now. T shook his head. I just gave you some water. Anyone could have done that. But no one did, Lyra said softly. For years, no one did. I was alone. I was worthless. I believed what they told me, that I was a burden, that I did not deserve to exist. But you showed me that was not true. You showed everyone that was not true. T did not know what to say. He had never thought of himself as someone who could change things. He was just a normal human, nothing special. But maybe that was the point. Maybe change did not come from special people. Maybe it came from ordinary people who decided to do something, even when it was hard. The confrontation came on the 5th day. T was walking to class when Kira appeared in front of him. She was not alone. Behind her stood a group of at least 10 Dravoks, including Vorn and several others he recognized as members of powerful families. The corridor emptied quickly as other students hurried away. Within moments, T was alone with the Dravoks. Human, Kira said. Her voice was cold and hard. You have caused me a great deal of embarrassment. My family is asking questions. My friends are laughing at me, all because of you. T stood his ground. I did not do anything wrong. I gave water to someone who needed it. That is all. That is all, Kira stepped closer. You humiliated me in front of the entire academy. You made me look weak. That is not something I can forgive. Then do not forgive me, T said. I do not need your forgiveness. Kira's eyes narrowed. You are either very brave or very stupid. I cannot decide which. Maybe both, T admitted. For a moment, something like respect flickered in Kira's eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by cold anger. I am going to give you one chance, she said. Apologize. Get on your knees and beg for my forgiveness, the way the Velari girl begged for water. Do this in front of everyone and I will let you live. T looked at her. He looked at the Dravox behind her, all of them watching, waiting to see what he would do. He thought about Earth. He thought about all the times in human history when people had been forced to kneel before tyrants. He thought about all the people who had refused, even when it cost them everything. No, he said. Kira blinked. No. No, T repeated. I will not apologize for doing the right thing. I will not kneel to someone who thinks cruelty is strength, and I will not beg. The Dravox shifted behind Kira, ready for violence, but Kira held up her hand, stopping them. You understand that I could destroy you, she said. Right here, right now. You could, T agreed, but you will not. Why not? T looked her straight in the eyes. Because if you hurt me, you prove that I was right. You prove that the only way you can deal with someone who disagrees with you is through violence. You prove that you are exactly the weak, cowardly bully I said you were. The corridor was dead silent. And more importantly, T continued, you know that the other humans are watching. Maybe not here, maybe not now, but they are watching. And if you hurt me, they will know, and they will never forget. Kira stared at him for a long, long moment. T could see the conflict in her eyes. She wanted to hurt him. She wanted to make him pay for everything he had done. But she was not stupid. She understood what he was saying. Humans were not powerful. Humans were not strong. But humans were united in a way that other species were not. They looked out for each other. They remembered every wrong done to one of their own. They were patient and they were persistent and they never let go. To make an enemy of one human was to make an enemy of all humans. And that was a complication that even the Dravox did not want. Finally, Kira stepped back. This is not over, she said, but her voice had lost some of its certainty. It never is, T said. Kira turned and walked away. One by one, the other Dravox followed. Vorn shot T a look of pure hatred, but he did not act on it. When they were gone, T let out the breath he had been holding. His knees almost gave out. He leaned against the wall, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. He had won, not through strength, not through violence, but through words and will. He had stood his ground and the Dravox had backed down. A moment later, Yuna came running around the corner. T, are you okay? I heard what happened. T laughed weakly. I am alive. I think that counts as okay. Behind Yuna came Hajan, and behind him came Lyra, her silver-blue face pale with worry. I thought they were going to kill you, Lyra said, her voice shaking. So did I, T admitted. Lyra threw her arms around him and hugged him tightly. T was surprised for a moment, then hugged her back. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for everything. T held her and looked over her shoulder at his friends. Yuna was smiling. Hajan was nodding. In the distance, other students were watching, their expressions filled with something new. Hope. The word spread quickly after that. A human had stood up to the Dravox twice. A human had refused to kneel, and the Dravox had walked away. Things were changing at the academy, slowly, quietly, but surely, and it had all started with a simple act. A canteen of water offered to someone in need. Weeks passed and the academy was not the same place it had been before. The change was small at first, almost invisible, but like ripples in water it spread outward, touching everything. Kira and her group still walked the corridors with their heads held high. They still had power, still had connections, still had the backing of important families. But something had shifted. They no longer tormented Lyra. They no longer attacked the weak so openly. Other students had started to watch, to judge, to remember. The Dravox were learning something new. Cruelty had consequences. T became known throughout the academy. He did not want fame. He did not seek attention. But the story of what he had done spread anyway, growing larger with each telling. Some versions said he had fought 10 Dravoks at once. Some said he had special powers that humans had been hiding. The truth was simpler but somehow more powerful. He had just offered water to someone who needed it. Other humans at the academy began to gather around him, not because he asked them to, but because they saw something in him that made them want to be better. Yuna became one of his closest friends, her sharp tongue and quick thinking proving valuable in countless small battles. Hajin grew bolder, speaking up in class when he saw something wrong. New faces appeared, humans from other sections who wanted to be part of something. They started sitting with Lyra at meals. Not just tea, but all of them. What had once been an empty table in the corner of the cafeteria became the most crowded spot in the room. Humans and Velari sitting together, talking, laughing, sharing food and stories. Other species began to notice. A group of small aliens called the Mari, who had also been targeted by bullies, started joining them. A silent being made of living crystal took to standing near their table, watching over them like a guardian. Even some Dravoks, younger ones who had never liked Kira's ways, began to question what they had been taught. The academy staff could not ignore what was happening. For years, they had looked the other way when the powerful hurt the weak. But now there were too many eyes watching, too many voices speaking out. A formal investigation was opened into the treatment of Velari students. New rules were proposed to protect refugees and minorities. None of this happened overnight. It took time, effort, and countless small acts of courage. But it happened. One evening, about a month after the confrontation in the corridor, Lyra found T sitting alone in the garden. The artificial stars shone above them, soft and peaceful. She sat down beside him without speaking. For a while, they just looked at the stars together. "I received a message today," Lyra finally said. "From my aunt. She is on a colony ship heading to a new world, a place where the remaining Velari are building a new home." "That is wonderful," T said. "Are you going to join her?" Lyra shook her head. "Not yet. I want to finish my studies here. I want to prove that a Velari can succeed at the academy, that we are not the worthless refugees everyone thinks we are." She paused and looked at him. Her silver eyes were bright, full of a fire that had not been there when they first met. "You gave me that," she said. "You gave me hope when I had none. You gave me strength when I was ready to give up." T felt embarrassed. "I did not do that much. I just offered you some water." "You did more than that," Lyra said. "You showed me that kindness exists in the universe. You showed me that not everyone is cruel, that not everyone looks away when others suffer. For a long time I thought I was alone. You proved that I was wrong." T did not know what to say. He had never been good with words, never been comfortable with praise. "Can I ask you something?" Lyra said. "Of course." "Why, I have asked you before, but I still do not fully understand. You risked everything for me. You made enemies of the most powerful group in the academy. You could have been hurt, could have been killed. And I am nobody. I have nothing to offer you, so why did you do it?" T thought about the question for a long time. It was the same question he had been asking himself ever since that day in the corridor. "On Earth," he said slowly, "there is an old idea. It says that the true measure of a society is how it treats its most vulnerable members. Not the strong, not the powerful, but the weak. The ones who have no voice. The ones who cannot protect themselves." He picked up a small stone from the garden floor and turned it over in his hands. "When I saw you that day, being forced to beg for water, I thought about that idea. I thought about all the times in human history when people stood by and did nothing while others suffered. I thought about how easy it would be to just walk away, to pretend I had not seen anything." He set the stone down gently. "But I also thought about all the times when one person decided to do something. Not because they were strong or powerful, but because they believed it was right. Those moments, those small acts of kindness and courage, they are what make us human. They are what give me hope that we can be better than we are." Lyra listened in silence, her eyes never leaving his face. "I did not help you because I expected something in return," T continued. "I helped you because that is who I want to be. I want to be the kind of person who stands up for others. I want to be the kind of person who offers water to someone who is thirsty, even if it costs me everything." He looked at her and smiled. "You asked why, that is why. Because kindness should not need a reason. Because compassion should not need a reward. Because being human, truly human, means caring for others even when it is hard." Lyra was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached out and took his hand. "Thank you," she said softly, "not just for the water, not just for standing up to Kira, but for teaching me what it means to be human." T squeezed her hand. "You are not human." Lyra smiled. "No, but maybe being human is not about species. Maybe it is about choices. Maybe it is about who we decide to be." They sat together in the garden, watching the artificial stars. Around them, the academy hummed with life, students from 100 different worlds going about their days. Most of them did not know T or Lyra. Most of them had never heard the full story of what had happened. But some of them had, and those few were changing just a little, just enough. They were choosing to be kinder. They were choosing to speak up. They were choosing to see others not as weak or strong, but as people deserving of respect and dignity. The galaxy was vast and old, filled with empires and wars and cruelty beyond measure. One human at one small academy could not change all of that, but he could change something. He could create ripples that spread outward, touching lives he would never know. And maybe that was enough. Months later, when T graduated from the academy, he was not famous. He was not powerful. He did not have wealth or connections or political influence. He was just a human, one of billions, ordinary in almost every way. But the story of what he had done lived on. It was told in cafeterias and dormitories, in ships traveling between stars and colonies on distant worlds. A human who offered water to a dying alien girl. A human who stood up to bullies and refused to kneel. A human who believed that kindness was stronger than cruelty. The story changed as it spread, growing and shrinking, gaining details and losing others. But the core remained the same. And every time someone heard it, they thought about their own life, their own choices, their own moments of decision. What kind of person did they want to be? The galaxy was learning something new about humans. They were not the strongest species. They were not the smartest or the fastest or the most advanced, but they had something that others did not. They had compassion that crossed boundaries. They had courage that came from love rather than hate. They had a stubborn belief that doing the right thing mattered, even when no one was watching. And sometimes, in the darkest corners of the universe, that was enough to light a fire that would never go out. In the garden of the Galactic Unity Academy, a small plaque was installed many years later. It marked the spot where a human and a Velari had once sat together, watching artificial stars. The plaque had only a few words, but they said everything that needed to be said. Sometimes the strongest thing in the universe is a hand offering water to someone in need. And below that, in smaller letters, for T and Lara, who showed us what it means to be human. The garden was quiet now, empty except for the soft glow of stars above. But the story lived on, spreading across the galaxy like ripples in an endless ocean. One small act of kindness. That was all it took to change everything.